Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down the source material to get to the bottom of big topics. Today, we're talking about a massive shift in who controls our news and what that actually means for all of us. Okay, let's kick things off with just one number. But wow, what a number it is. The sources we're looking at tell us that only 28% of Americans have a fair amount of trust in the mass media. That is a historic rock-bottom low. So what on earth is going on here?
Well, the sources point to one key reason for this crisis of faith, and they have a name for it: oligarchization. Now, this isn't just about rich people buying newspapers. It's about changing the entire purpose of media, from something that's supposed to serve the public to a private tool used for personal gain.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at who these new media barons actually are. Then we'll get into the why. Why are they buying these outlets? After that, we'll break down the consequences for democracy, see if there's another way to do things, and finally ask what it would take to rebuild the press.
All right, first up, let's get a handle on the key players here and really understand the sheer scale of their control over the information we see every day.
You know, this image from our sources just lays it all out, doesn't it? It's really a tale of two completely different models. On one side, you have media being used as a strategic shield for the powerful, and on the other, you have journalism being protected as a public good. It's a fundamental conflict.
So how did we even get here? You gotta understand, this didn't just happen overnight. The sources tell us that decades of deregulation slowly chipped away at the rules, allowing for this massive consolidation. So now, today, just 6 giant corporations control almost the entire US media market. It really sets the stage for a few powerful people to have an incredible amount of influence.
And right in the middle of this super concentrated market, you've got this handful of billionaires. And they now own some of the most influential platforms on the planet, the very places that really shape our public conversation, from our social media feeds to the newspapers that set the national agenda. Okay, this brings us to the big question, right? Why? Why are these billionaires snapping up media outlets? The sources are pretty clear. It's almost never about making a profit. There's something much, much deeper going on. And wow, this quote from the LA Progressive just hits the nail on the head. The argument is that this isn't just a business deal, it's a total transformation of what freedom of the press even means, shifting power away from journalists and putting it squarely in the hands of the owners. So when you really start digging into the why, a really clear picture starts to form. These news outlets become, as one source puts it, a hedge against democracy. They're used to protect fortunes from taxes, to get an extra level of power politically, and to win regulatory battles. And of course, in the age of AI, they're a total goldmine of data to train new models. So let's talk about the fallout. What does all this actually mean for newsrooms? And, for the rest of us? You can just imagine what this does inside a newsroom. It creates this chilling effect. Journalists talk about a culture of what the sources call preventive capitulation, basically self-censoring stories that might upset the owner's other interests, sometimes without a word even being said. And this isn't just a problem for the big national papers. Look at this number. As these big corporations focus on national profits, local newspapers have just been gutted. It's created more than 1,000 news deserts all across the country. That's communities with no local paper at all. And this has real, measurable consequences. It's not just a theory. The sources show a direct link. When the local news dies, corruption and government waste go up. Without a watchdog, our democracy at the local level really begins to suffer. There is actually a term for this whole trend. The sources call it the Berlusconiization of America. And yeah, that's a direct reference to the former Italian prime minister, who was a media mogul himself. He was the perfect example of how media ownership, business interests, and political power can all fuse into one. But here's the thing. Does it have to be this way? Is this the only game in town? Well, the sources say no, and they point to a pretty powerful alternative. Okay, let's actually compare these two models directly. On the one side, you have the billionaire model, which, as we've seen, often treats media as a tool. But on the other, you have independent models, like the Scott Trust that owns The Guardian. These are legally set up for one reason: to protect journalism as a public good. And here's the proof in the pudding, right? According to the sources, when you look at the news brands that people consistently trust the most, they're the ones with these protective structures, whether it's a trust, an employee-owned company, or a public media model. So what's the takeaway here? And where do we possibly go from here to start rebuilding the press as a pillar of democracy? Well, according to the experts, the very first step is a huge mental shift. We have to stop thinking about journalism as just another product to be bought and sold. We need to start seeing it as essential civic infrastructure, just as important as our roads or our power grid. It's the foundation of a healthy democracy, and it needs to be protected. And that really leaves us with this one final, really critical question to think about. When the watchdogs are owned by the very people they're supposed to be watching, who's left to hold the powerful accountable?
All right, so let's do a quick recap. The US media is going through this process of oligarchization, where a few billionaires are using news outlets as tools for their own power. This whole thing has fueled a historic crisis in trust, created those news deserts we talked about, and it's threatening the media's role as a check on power. But, and this is so important, we've also seen that there are other models out there that work, ones that legally protect journalism and earn way more public trust.
Thank you for joining us for this explainer. The health of our information ecosystem is absolutely vital for our democracy. And as we've seen today, just understanding these power dynamics is a crucial first step toward protecting it. And as always, all the sources we use to build this analysis are right here on screen, and you can find a complete list with links down in the description below.